The market of Varthus Prime was a place no human wanted to walk through. The air was heavy, filled with strange smells and voices from hundreds of alien races. Every corner glowed with neon lights and signs written in languages that shimmered and moved on their own. Evan Cole walked slowly, his eyes scanning the stalls. Pretending to be just another traveler, he had come to buy supplies, food, filters, maybe spare parts for his ship, but something felt wrong. He noticed how quiet the crowd became when he passed. Humans were rare here. Most believed they were weak, even extinct in some parts of the galaxy. Yet Evan didn't care what they thought. He just wanted to finish his business and leave. He moved past tanks filled with living fish that had too many eyes. He saw cages with glowing birds singing sad metallic tunes. And then he stopped, his heart almost freezing inside his chest. Inside a glass chamber near the back of the market stood a young alien woman. She wasn't like the others being sold. She looked almost human. Soft skin with a silver blue tone. Her long white hair fell over her shoulders and her eyes were bright violet. But what made Evan's stomach twist wasn't her beauty. It was the tag on her wrist. A glowing red tag that read, "For sale, Varthus Biomeat Division," under it. The numbers kept changing, showing her price like she was a piece of meat. The vendors nearby laughed and joked as they cleaned the glass around her. One alien pointed at her and said,
"Fresh stock, premium genetic quality."
Still alive. The crowd didn't see her as a person. Only as property. Evan felt anger rising inside him. But he tried to stay calm. He whispered to himself, "This can't be real. They're selling people now?" The woman inside the glass opened her eyes slowly. She looked around, confused, weak, her lips moving but no sound came out. When her gaze met his, something inside him broke. Her eyes weren't empty. They were full of fear and hope at the same time. Like she couldn't believe someone was actually looking at her. Not through her. Evan stepped closer, his heart pounding louder than the noise around him. The alien vendor noticed him and smiled, showing sharp teeth. "Ah, human buyer. You have good taste, yes? This one's new. Strong DNA, smart, calm, very obedient." Evan clenched his fists but forced a small smile. "What's her story?" The vendor shrugged. "Who cares? She was taken from a war world. Their kind lost. She's product now." Evan's voice trembled. "How much?" The vendor grinned wider, pressing buttons on a floating pad. "For you? Discount. 10,000 credits." Evan looked at the glowing tag again. It pulsed like a heartbeat. He knew it was insane. He didn't even know this woman. But he couldn't walk away. Something deep in his chest screamed that this wasn't right. He reached for his credit chip and said, "I'll take her." The laughter around him stopped. The vendor blinked, surprised. "You serious? You buying her for what? Meat experiment?" Evan said quietly. "To set her free." The vendor's grin faded. He didn't understand, but the scanner beeped. The transaction went through and the glass door opened with a hiss. The alien woman stumbled out, almost falling. Evan caught her, her skin cold and trembling like ice. She tried to speak, her voice weak. Why would you do this?" Evan helped her stand and said softly, "Because no one else would." The vendor shouted behind him, "Human fool! You just bought trouble." He ignored them, wrapping a thin coat around her shoulders. They began to walk away through the crowded market. People turned to stare, whispering, some mocking, some afraid. The alarms above started to flash red. Someone had reported the sale. Evan quickened his pace, pulling her toward the exit. Her voice came again, barely a whisper. "You don't understand. They'll come for us." He looked at her, confused. "Who?" She turned her violet eyes to him, filled with fear. "The Dominion. They own everything here, even me." Evan didn't reply. He just kept walking faster. The noise behind them grew louder, guards shouting, metallic footsteps approaching. He didn't know what he had gotten himself into, but he knew one thing for sure. He couldn't let them take her back. Outside, the red moons of Varthus Prime glowed over the marketplace. Evan led her into the shadows. Hiding among the ships, his heart was racing. But his mind was clear, he whispered. "You're free now." "I promise," she looked at him, her eyes shining in the dim light, and said softly, "You just signed your death, human. But thank you." The market sirens wailed behind them as they disappeared into the night. Neither of them knew it yet. But this single act of kindness was about to change the galaxy forever. Evan held Lyra's arm tightly as they slipped through the dark streets of Varthus Prime. The air smelled like metal and smoke, alarms echoing from far behind them. Guards shouted orders in alien tongues. their boots clanging against the ground. Red lights flashed across the sky as search drones swept through the market. Scanning every face, Evan knew they had only minutes before the Dominion caught up. Lyra's steps were weak, her body trembling from exhaustion and fear. She whispered, "Why didn't you leave me there?" Evan didn't answer, his eyes darting across every corner, every shadow. They turned down a narrow alley, the smell of burning oil thick in the air. He finally said, "Because you're not a thing to sell. You're alive. And that means something." She stared at him, confused, her expression torn between anger and disbelief. They reached a dim hangar filled with ships, small traders, cargo vessels, and a few broken machines. Evan pointed to a rusted freighter with faded letters on its side. Starling. It was his ship, old but loyal. He guided her inside, closing the ramp behind them, the metal door hissing shut. The noise of the market faded as the ship sealed. Lyra looked around, touching the walls gently as if they were something sacred. "This is human tech," she said softly. Evan smiled faintly. "Not the best kind, but it flies." He moved to the cockpit, pressing a few buttons. The ship's engine coughed, lights flickered, and the controls came to life. "Hold tight," he said. Gripping the throttle outside, heavy footsteps grew louder. Dominion guards had tracked them to the hangar. A voice shouted through a speaker, "Human! Release the property and surrender." Lyra flinched, her hands covering her ears. Evan gritted his teeth and hit the launch button. The ship rumbled, shaking as it rose. Bolts and scrap metal fell from the ceiling as the engines roared, then, boom. A blaster shot grazed the side, leaving a trail of smoke. Evan pushed the throttle harder, shouting, "Come on, Starling, don't fail me now." The freighter burst out of the hangar, tearing through the sky. Explosions followed them as the Dominion guards opened fire. Through the window, Lyra could see the city shrinking behind them. Towers of glass, factories, and bright alien signs fading into dust. She whispered, "You can't escape them. They own the sky." Evan's eyes narrowed. "Then we'll go where they can't follow." He angled the ship toward the upper atmosphere. The stars appeared through the haze, cold and endless as they left the planet's gravity. The sensors beeped, 3 blips following close. Lyra looked at the screen, fear spreading across her face. "Them," she said softly. "Zareth Dominion hunters. They'll never stop." Evan checked the radar, his hands steady though his heart raced. "We'll lose them in the nebula ahead." Lyra shook her head. "That nebula kills everything that enters it. You'll die." Evan smiled slightly. "Guess we'll find out together." She stared at him for a long moment, then said quietly, "Humans are strange. You risk death for someone you don't even know," he replied. "Maybe that's why we survive. We don't stop caring." Lyra turned away, her eyes shining under the dim lights for the first time. She didn't feel like property, she felt seen. The Dominion ships closed in. Lasers slicing through space, Evan jerked the controls, diving through debris and asteroid fragments. The old freighter groaned, warning lights flashing everywhere. Lyra held onto the chair, her voice trembling. "They're too close!" Evan pressed a button, releasing a burst of chaff. The screens flared with static, confusing the enemy's sensors. Then, without warning, he cut the engines. Letting the ship drift silently, the Dominion scanners passed right over them, missing their signal for a few seconds. There was peace, only the hum of cooling metal. Evan let out a breath. "We might make it." Lyra looked at him, a small smile appearing on her lips. "You're insane, but clever," he laughed softly. "I'll take that as a compliment." But then, the radar beeped again, louder this time, 3 red dots, closer than before. "Faster." Lyra's eyes widened. "They found us again." Evan stared at the nebula ahead, swirling with purple storms and electric clouds. No sane pilot entered it. Ships vanished inside all the time. But he didn't see any other choice. He looked at her and said, "Hold on tight, Lyra. This is going to be rough." She grabbed his arm, her voice shaking. "If we go in there, we might not come out." He smiled faintly, eyes focused on the storm. Better to die free than live as property. The Starling's engines roared back to life. The small ship shot forward, heading straight into the glowing clouds. Lightning danced across the hull as the stars disappeared behind the fog. The Dominion warships followed, vanishing one by one into the storm. Inside the cockpit, alarms screamed and the ship shook like it was tearing apart. Lyra clutched the seat, whispering, "What have you done?" Evan's eyes stayed on the storm, his voice calm. What humans always do, try. Outside, the nebula swallowed them whole, the stars vanished, and the world went dark. Only their breathing, their fear, and the endless storm remained, and deep within that darkness, something ancient stirred, waiting for them to arrive. The storm around them never ended. The nebula glowed with violent purple light. Lightning flashing through waves of silver gas, Evan's ship, the Starling, groaned as it pushed deeper inside. Every sensor screamed errors. Static filled the radio and the stars were gone. Only darkness and light, like a living ocean that wanted to swallow them whole. Lyra sat beside him, gripping the seat so tightly her fingers turned pale. "You shouldn't have come here," she whispered, her voice shaking. "No one escapes the Dominion by hiding in the storm veil." Evan smiled faintly, though his eyes were locked on the flickering controls. "Maybe no one tried hard enough," he said quietly. The ship shook again, sparks flying from the panel, and the lights dimmed for a moment. Everything went silent, the engines cut off, and they drifted weightless in the storm. Lyra turned to him. "Are we dead?" He checked the power core. "Not yet." Outside, the mist cleared for a second, revealing shadows, giant shapes drifting through the clouds. Massive ships, broken and ancient. Floating like ghosts, their hulls were dark, covered with alien symbols and burn marks from old battles. Lyra's eyes widened. "These are war wrecks. From the old human wars," Evan frowned, staring out the window. "How do you know that?" She hesitated before speaking. "Because my people fought them." The silence between them grew heavy. Evan didn't speak, only listened to the faint hum returning to the engines. He thought about what she said. Humans had fought her kind long ago, and now, centuries later, he had saved one of them. Maybe history didn't matter anymore. Maybe survival was all that was left. A sudden beep broke the quiet. The radar blinked. 3 red signals had entered the nebula behind them. The Zareth Dominion hunters. Fast and merciless, Lyra's voice trembled. "They found us again." Evan gritted his teeth. "Then we hide where they can't follow." He turned the ship toward the wrecks, guiding it between shattered hulls and drifting debris. Metal groaned as they passed under the shadow of a massive battlecruiser. It was twice the size of his ship, its name faintly visible through dust and frost. USS Horizon. Lyra's breath caught. "That's human writing." Evan's eyes widened. "Then it's one of ours." The Dominion ships fired into the storm, blue plasma bolts lighting up the clouds. The Starling dodged left then right, scraping against the wreck's outer hull. "Come on," he muttered. Just a little further, he found an open docking bay, half broken but still intact. The freighter slipped inside, scraping the metal walls, sparks flying as it landed. They sat in silence, breathing hard. Lyra looked out the window, her eyes wide. The nebula lightning flashed again, showing the warships moving like sharks outside. Evan shut down the engines completely, plunging them into darkness. "Now we wait," he whispered. Lyra nodded, her voice soft. "You risked everything to save me, and now you'll die because of it." Evan looked at her, his tone calm but firm. "If I die, at least it's for something, right?" Minutes passed. Maybe hours. The radar stayed quiet, no sound, no movement. Only the distant hum of the nebula. Then something strange happened. A faint blue glow appeared on the wall near the airlock. Lines of light traced across the metal. Forming symbols, Lyra stepped closer, whispering, "It's reacting to us." Evan followed her, his hand hovering near his weapon. The symbols pulsed faster, and the door opened with a hiss. Inside, cold air rushed out and dim lights flickered on. They stepped into a long corridor, dusty, quiet, frozen in time. Old banners hung from the ceiling, showing faded images of Earth and a human flag. Lyra whispered, "I thought humans were extinct." Evan's voice echoed softly. "We just stopped being noticed." They walked deeper inside, finding control panels and terminals covered in frost. Evan brushed his hand across one screen and it flickered alive. A hologram appeared. A man in a tattered uniform. He spoke with a calm, weary voice. "If you're seeing this, humanity is not gone. It is waiting." Lyra gasped, her hand covering her mouth. The hologram continued. "This ship, the USS Horizon, carries the last coordinates of the hidden fleets." Evan's heart raced. "Hidden fleets!" The hologram flickered again. "Buried deep beyond the veil, until the day someone remembers who we are." The recording ended, leaving only the hum of power in the silence. Lyra turned to Evan, her voice shaking. "You didn't just find a ghost ship, Evan. You found proof humanity still lives." Before he could answer, the radar screamed again. 3 new signals. Much closer, the Dominion had found their hiding spot. Evan ran to the cockpit, his eyes sharp. Then it's time they learn humans don't run forever. Outside, the storm began to glow brighter. The wrecks around them stirred, as if awakening from a long sleep, and deep within the ship, something old and powerful started to hum. The forgotten heartbeat of human vengeance, ready to rise again. The lights of the USS Horizon flickered to life one by one. Cold corridors that had slept for centuries began to hum with faint energy. Evan stood in the control room, dust floating around him like snow. Beside him, Lyra stared at the glowing screens in disbelief. "This ship is alive again," she whispered. Evan nodded slowly. "Or maybe it's been waiting." The air was heavy with history. Every wall held marks of old battles, burned metal, and bullet scars. Human banners still hung torn but proud, showing the image of Earth's blue sphere surrounded by stars. Lyra traced the cloth with her fingers, her voice quiet. "I never thought humans built ships like this. My people told us your kind were primitive." Evan gave a small smile. "Yeah, that's what they wanted everyone to think." He moved to the main console, brushing away layers of dust. The hologram of the old captain reappeared, static crackling around his form. "If you found this ship," the hologram said, "then the Dominion never erased us completely." Lyra looked at Evan. "Dominion, they destroyed your worlds, didn't they?" Evan's jaw tightened. "They tried. But humans don't vanish that easily." Outside the ship, the nebula rumbled. Flashes of lightning illuminated the wreckage drifting through the mist. And among those shadows, something moved. A shape too big, too slow, too quiet. Lyra turned to the viewport, her voice trembling. "Evan, something's out there." He peered through the fog. Massive tendrils of black smoke were weaving between the wrecks. At first he thought it was debris, but then the shadow shifted, alive, aware. The ship's sensors flickered back on, displaying strange readings. "Unknown life form detected," the computer said in a calm, robotic tone. Lyra backed away from the window. "It's hunting the energy from the reactors." Evan turned down the power immediately, plunging the room into half-darkness. The only light came from the faint glow of the console and Lyra's pale skin. For a moment, silence returned, then something scraped along the hull. Metal against metal, slow and deep. It felt like the sound traveled through their bones. Lyra whispered, "It knows we're here." Evan looked around, thinking fast. If it's alive, it can sense movement and heat. "Stay still." Minutes passed like hours. Outside, the black shape slithered over the ship's surface, its glowing eyes passing by the window. Then, as suddenly as it appeared, it drifted away into the storm. Evan exhaled slowly, his hands shaking slightly. Lyra looked at him, her eyes wide. "That thing, what was it?" He sighed. A shadow of war. Some say the Dominion created living weapons that fed on ships. Maybe this is one of them, Lyra whispered. Then it's proof. The Dominion's past never truly died. The silence was broken by a sudden alarm. Red lights blinked on the radar, Dominion signals, 3 ships approaching fast. They found us again, Evan said through clenched teeth. Lyra's face turned pale. They'll destroy everything, including this ship. Evan ran to the control station. Not if I can wake its heart. He accessed the main core, his hands moving over the controls. Come on, old girl, he muttered. I know you still have fight left in you. The lights across the corridors began to pulse brighter. Reactors deep below the deck hummed. Slowly rising from dormancy, energy readings climbed, and the computer's calm voice spoke. Reactor online. Command link authorized. A panel on the console opened, revealing a small port labeled DNA authorization required. Evan frowned. DNA? That's new. Before he could act, Lyra stepped forward and touched the scanner. Her skin glowed faintly, and the system beeped. Access granted. Hybrid key accepted, the computer said. Evan looked at her in surprise. Hybrid key? What does that mean? Lyra looked away, her voice quiet. My mother was from the Dominion. My father wasn't. He stared at her, stunned. But there was no time for questions. Outside, the Dominion fleet opened fire, plasma streaks cutting through the mist. The horizon trembled as it came fully alive. Ancient weapons unfolded from its hull, glowing with white-blue light. Evan gripped the controls. You ready for this? Outside, the shadow creature moved again. Drawn to the energy, it wrapped around one Dominion cruiser, crushing it like paper. The remaining ships panicked. Firing wildly into the mist, Lyra gasped, It's helping us. Evan shook his head. No, it's just hungry. The last Dominion ship tried to flee. But the Horizon's main cannon charged one final time. A beam of pure light cut through the fog, silent and powerful. The enemy ship exploded into fragments. The nebula quieted again, leaving only the wreckage drifting in the glowing storm. Evan leaned back, breathing hard. Lyra looked at him, smiling faintly. You did it, he shook his head. No, we did it. But before either could rest, the console beeped softly. A message appeared on the screen. Coordinates flashing in green light. Fleet beacon signal active. Lyra's voice trembled. That means... Evan stared at the screen, his voice low. It means this ship just told the others we're alive. The nebula outside shimmered brighter than before, and in that light far away, the faint outlines of other ancient ships began to stir. The hum of the USS Horizon filled the air like a heartbeat, steady and alive again after centuries of silence. The blue glow from the consoles bathed the room in a soft light, and for the first time Lyra felt warmth instead of fear. Outside, the nebula calmed, like the storm itself was watching them. Evan stood at the main screen, staring at the flashing green coordinates that had appeared after the battle. Lyra stepped closer, her voice soft. Those coordinates. What are they? Evan's expression hardened. They're the signal of a human fleet. She froze, disbelief in her eyes. That can't be. The Dominion wiped humanity from the stars centuries ago. He looked at her, his voice steady. They tried to erase us, but some of us learned to hide instead. He pressed a button and a hologram of a star map appeared. Dots of light, hundreds of them, blinked faintly across the galaxy, connected by old hidden routes. Each one marked the location of a sleeping human warship. Silent and waiting, Lyra's voice trembled. You mean, your people are still out there? Evan nodded, his eyes reflecting the stars on the hologram. Buried, forgotten, but not gone. The air felt heavier, filled with the weight of history. Lyra touched one of the glowing points and the hologram zoomed in. A message began to play, a voice from long ago, deep and calm. If you found this archive, then humanity still breathes. Our fleets sleep in silence, hidden until the day we rise again. Never forget, compassion is our greatest weapon. Evan closed his eyes, the words sinking deep into his heart. He whispered, That's why we survived. Not because we were stronger, but because we cared when others stopped caring. Lyra turned to him, her voice quiet. That's why you saved me, isn't it? He smiled faintly. I didn't plan to. I just couldn't walk away. She looked down, her eyes filled with emotion. You risked everything for someone your kind once called enemy. Evan replied softly. Maybe that's the only way to end the war. One choice at a time. But before their words could settle, the radar began to beep again. Lyra glanced at the screen, her face draining of color. No. They're back. Evan looked closer. 3 larger signals this time. Heavier ships moving fast. The Dominion won't stop, he said quietly. They'll burn every wreck in this nebula until nothing's left. Lyra's voice shook. If they discover the fleet beacon, they'll destroy everything before it wakes. Evan clenched his jaw. Then we wake it first, he rushed to the command console, scanning the data. The horizon has the coordinates. But it's locked behind an encryption key. Lyra's eyes widened. An old Dominion lock. They built this ship after capturing it in war. Only someone with their blood can open it. Evan turned toward her, understanding dawning on his face. Lyra, that means you. She hesitated, fear in her eyes. If I use my link, they'll trace me. The Dominion will know exactly where we are. Evan met her gaze, calm and steady. They'll find us anyway. But if we open that beacon first, humanity will find us too. For a long moment, silence hung between them. Then she nodded. All right, I'll do it. She stepped forward and placed her hand on the glowing control plate. Blue light spread across her arm like fire, and symbols filled the air. Her voice trembled as she said, Authorization. Lyra of the Zareth line, the system replied. Access confirmed. Beacon protocol unlocked. The ship vibrated as the ancient human distress signal pulsed through the nebula. Outside, faint blue lights shimmered across the mist like awakening stars. Evan watched in awe. You did it. But Lyra's face was pale. The energy link was draining her. He grabbed her shoulders. Stop. You're burning yourself out. She shook her head weakly. No, it's working. I can feel them. The ship's core glowed brighter, and for a moment, they both felt it. Voices faint but human, whispering across the void. Then the console exploded in sparks. The lights flickering out. Lyra fell to her knees, her body trembling. Evan caught her before she hit the floor, holding her close. Lyra, stay with me, he said, his voice breaking. She looked up, weak but smiling faintly. It's done. They heard us outside, deep in the nebula. Something responded. A low rumble. Like thunder from beyond time through the fog. Giant shadows began to move, massive ships, old and silent, their engines slowly glowing to life. Evan looked out in disbelief, whispering, They're waking. The console sparked again, displaying one message in bold letters. Human fleet. Reactivation sequence complete. Lyra's voice was soft, fading. You've brought them back, Evan looked at her, his hand gripping hers tightly. No, we did. Outside, the first human warship ignited fully, its hull shining like a rising sun in the darkness. And as the Dominion fleet entered the nebula, unaware of what waited ahead, the lost children of Earth were finally ready to answer. The nebula burned with light as the first human warships woke from their endless sleep. Old hulls groaned, engines pulsed, and forgotten banners reappeared under blue fire. The USS Horizon stood at the center of it all. Once a tomb, now a spark of rebirth. Evan stared at the screens, his heart pounding. They're really waking up. Lyra lay weakly in the chair beside him, pale but smiling. You did it, Evan. You woke your people. He looked at her, his voice quiet. No, we did. You gave them the key. Then the radar screamed. 3 massive Dominion dreadnoughts had entered the nebula, their red energy cutting through the mist like knives. Their weapons glowed, locking on the horizon. Evan's breath caught. Each ship was larger than a city. Lyra forced herself to sit up, whispering, They're here for the signal. They'll destroy everything. Evan's eyes hardened. Then this is where we make our stand. He slammed his hand onto the console, rerouting power to shields and weapons. The Horizon's old cannons hummed with white light, shaking the deck beneath their feet. Lyra linked her neural band to the system again, her voice calm but tired. I can boost targeting, but it will burn my energy. Evan turned to her. No, you've done enough. She cut him off softly. If I don't help, you'll die before the fleet even wakes. He met her gaze, and for a long moment neither spoke. Then he nodded. All right, let's show them what freedom looks like. Outside, the Dominion fleet began to fire. Beams of plasma streaked through the storm, lighting up the nebula in shades of red and gold. The Horizon dodged left, its thrusters screaming. Energy shields flaring under impact. Evan shouted over the alarms, "Return fire!" The ship's cannons unleashed a burst of blue light. Ripping through the darkness, one Dominion frigate exploded instantly, its remains scattering into glowing dust. But two dreadnoughts kept coming, unstoppable, merciless. Lyra's hands moved in perfect rhythm with his commands, human and alien working as one, guiding the ancient ship through chaos. Each blast they fired was precise, each movement timed like heartbeat and breath. Energy levels at 40%, the computer warned. Evan gritted his teeth. "Keep firing." Outside, one dreadnought's shield cracked, blue fire spilling across its hull. Lyra gasped, "We're hurting them." Evan smiled through sweat and smoke. "Then we keep going." But then, the shadow returned. The dark creature from the nebula slithered between wrecks, drawn by the energy and heat of battle. Its enormous form coiled through the storm, eyes glowing like dying suns. A beam of pure destruction tore through the storm. At the same moment, the Horizon's cannon released its shot. The two beams collided, exploding in a silent flash that filled the void with fire and light. The shockwave spread across the nebula, shaking every drifting ship awake. Panels burst, systems screamed, and the Horizon spun out of control. Evan shielded Lyra as debris rained around them, the ship burning and breaking apart, then silence for a moment. Everything stopped. No sound, no alarms, no motion. Only darkness and the faint hum of something vast moving in the distance. Evan blinked through smoke, his vision blurred. Lyra's voice came softly. "Evan, look." He turned to the main screen, cracked and flickering outside. Through the glowing clouds, hundreds of massive ships were moving. Human warships, sleek, powerful, and alive again. Their engines burning bright one by one. They aligned behind the horizon. Their comm channels crackled to life. A calm voice spoke through the static. "Unknown vessel. This is Admiral Reyes of the Terran Vanguard. We received your signal, and your fight." Evan's eyes filled with tears he hadn't realized he was holding. Lyra smiled weakly. "You see? They heard us." The Admiral's voice continued, firm and steady. "You are not alone anymore. Prepare for counterattack." Outside, the newly awakened human fleet turned their guns toward the last Dominion flagship. Engines roared, lights blazed, and for the first time in centuries, humanity answered with thunder. The storm that had hidden their extinction now became their battlefield. And in that light, the galaxy saw the truth. Humans were never gone. They were only waiting for the right moment to remind the stars why they feared and loved them. The nebula was no longer silent. It roared with light, thunder, and fire as the Terran Vanguard, the long-lost human fleet, rose from centuries of sleep. Ships of every class emerged through the swirling clouds, their engines igniting like newborn stars. Names long forgotten were reborn in blue flame. Valiant, Odyssey, Solaris, Ironwind, each one answered the same signal. The one sent by a human and an alien who dared to defy the galaxy. Inside the shattered USS Horizon, Evan stirred among the smoke and debris. He felt blood on his forehead, metal dust in his lungs, and silence pressing against his ears. The ship was dying around him, panels sparking, oxygen leaking. He turned and saw Lyra lying motionless against the floor, her silver hair drifting in zero gravity. "Lyra," he whispered, crawling toward her. His heart pounding in panic, he reached her, his hands shaking as he touched her cheek. Her skin was cold, but her chest still moved, barely. She opened her eyes slowly, weak but smiling. "You didn't die." He laughed softly through tears. "You either." She looked around the ruined bridge, the distant rumble of awakening fleets echoing outside. "You woke them, Evan. You brought your people home." He turned to the cracked viewing glass. Outside, hundreds of human ships surrounded them, forming a ring of light in the heart of the storm, their signals linked, their banners rising again after ages of silence. Each ship carried the emblem of Earth, a blue sphere encircled by wings of fire. For the first time in centuries, humanity's heart beat across the stars again. Then, through the mist, the last Dominion flagship appeared, damaged but alive. Its red engines burned, its weapons charging for one final strike. Admiral Reyes' voice crackled through the comm. "Unknown vessel, Horizon, your signal brought us back. Now guide our aim." Evan stumbled toward the console, half broken and sparking. He patched through the targeting feed, his voice hoarse but clear. "Admiral, focus fire on these coordinates." "End it now," Reyes replied. "Understood. For Earth." Outside, the human fleet shifted formation. Dozens of battleships turned in perfect unison, their cannons glowing bright white. Lyra weakly reached for his hand, her voice trembling. "You're really going to destroy them?" Evan looked at her, eyes full of pain. "They enslaved billions, Lyra. They called us extinct. They turned you into property. This ends today." She squeezed his hand gently, whispering, "Then end it. But don't become them." He hesitated, her words echoing through the chaos. Then he lifted her hand and kissed her forehead softly. "We'll show them mercy, humanity's kind of mercy." He switched the targeting mode from annihilation to disablement. The human fleet fired, hundreds of beams converging into one colossal wave of light. It struck the Dominion flagship, tearing through its weapons, engines, and shields without destroying it. Its hull burned, silent and helpless, drifting into